My name is Bruce McIntyre, and welcome. You're probably or mostly all family caregivers. All right. Well, we're glad that you're here because the caregivers, you are the ones who often make the drives to doctor's offices. You are the help me get up out of this chair assist person. You are bottle openers. You are the person who helps get the wet laundry out and into the dryer, perhaps. You're the one that does literally some of the heavy lifting, right? All of that and much more. And I know what you're thinking as we begin here. You're thinking, well, he's bald, but he looks young. So what can he possibly know about any of this? And I will grant you that in this room there is probably more collective wisdom with you than there is with me. But I do want to share with you part of our journey, and the purpose of sharing part of our journey and some models and some instruction that has helped us along the way, I want to share with you. And I want to, as I tell our story, I don't tell it to tell our story, but because you can probably identify with it very well. And I hope that when you walk out of here in about an hour and 15 minutes or so, that you feel like you have some practical tools in your toolbox that perhaps you did not have before. That maybe you have some things to, templates to lay over your life that help you cope and manage better. And I hope you feel a little bit better. I hope you've laughed a few times. You might have even cried a few times and have some good things to think about. So, what in the world do I know about this? Well, I'll tell you, I didn't want to know anything about this. Did you? We have found that we've learned a whole lot about stuff we didn't want to know anything about. But here's what happened. When my wife and I were 31 years old, we had a pretty good job, pretty good money, good friends, life was okay. We had never, either one of us, had a chronic illness. We knew people that did, we were sympathetic, but we'd never experienced it ourselves. And we had a 2.5-year-old daughter, and my son was on the way. Well, 2 weeks after our son was born, my wife realized she was getting increasingly and dramatically weaker and weaker at a very rapid pace, to the point that she couldn't pick up our newborn son off the ground. She couldn't get bent over to pick him up. And so we were very fortunate to receive a quick diagnosis and accurate of dermatomyositis by a Vanderbilt dermatologist. And we got started with the rheumatologist there, and we entered the world of chronic illness. We didn't realize that's what we were doing at the time. They said, we don't know the cause, we don't know the cure, you'll probably see 4 or 5 doctors, try 4 or 5 types of treatments, etc., etc. But we went home at age 31 and thought, well, yeah, but that's not for us. We'll just take the medicine and we'll be okay. Because that's how it works with everything else, right? You take the medicine, you get well, and you move on. But that's not how it works with the chronic illness. And so we were yet to learn that. Well, a few months into my extreme denial, I was really busy, and I kept thinking, well, any morning we'll wake up and my wife will be fine. And every morning I woke up and things were worse. My wife came to reality much quicker than I did because it was her body, it was her experience. But as the caregiver, I kind of lagged behind. And after a few months, there was an evening when she kind of gave me some information that hit me right between the eyes. And wives, you know, every now and then you kind of have to tell your husbands some information that hits them between the eyes. That's how we understand sometimes. And my wife is sparing in that, but it's always effective. And so she said, I don't feel like myself. I don't look like myself. I've swollen 40 pounds, more due to the medicine than the disease. I have a hump on my back, Cushing's syndrome. I can't sleep, and the one thing I need is sleep. I can't pick up my baby. I can't play with my toddler. And you're not dealing with it. And I need you to deal with it. Well, that hit me right between the eyes. And I stayed up late that night as she went on to bed, and I stayed up for several hours. And the exercise that I took myself through was to try to put myself in her shoes. Because up to that point, I was just trying to cope and hope, right? But I thought, okay, I have to put myself in her shoes. And as I did, I tell you, that was a heart-wrenching exercise. Because I thought, I'd be mad too if I couldn't do this. I'd be sad too if this was what I was dealing with. As I came out of that, I realized we've got to get away and talk about this. And so at the time, we lived just south of Nashville, Tennessee, and my parents lived between Nashville and Memphis. And so we dropped off our newborn, our 2.5-year-old, at my parents' house before they were old enough to be spending the night at their grandparents' house. And as we pulled out of the driveway and went on to Memphis for a night just to get away and talk about reality, we pulled out of the driveway, and as we began to talk about it, we started crying, and we cried all the way to Memphis because reality was harsh. But I would say that that weekend was perhaps one of the best weekends, in one sense, of our 19 years of marriage, because it is the weekend that my wife regained the partner that she needed to live with a chronic condition. She didn't need me to be in denial. She needed me to be with her. And honestly, it's not like you come out of denial once. You know, I kind of come and gone on that. But that's where it started for us. Well, one of the questions we were asking ourselves on that trip to Memphis a few months in was, what is happening to us? I mean, that was basically how you sum it up. It's like our whole life just exploded. Nothing normal has been upended. What is happening to us? That's the question we were asking. And basically the answer, if you want to sum it up, was change was happening. A disease was happening. And everybody like change? Well, it depends, right? You know, I mean, there's good change and bad change. If it's more money, more friends, more opportunities, that's the kind of change we like. But there also is unwelcome change in the world of disease and caregiving, right? I mean, for us, it took me 3 days to even try to pronounce it right. And then you try to pronounce the medicines correctly and understand what they do. And wait, we're seeing a what kind of doctor? What do they do? You know, and we just entered a world with a vocabulary unto itself. And so we were asking, what is happening to us? And I like the way that this is framed by a guy named William Bridges. He wrote a book some years ago, more for business than for caregivers, but I think it applies rather well. William Bridges wrote a book called Transitions. And in that book, he talks about change and transition in a way that we're going to talk about it today. He basically says that change is the thing that's happening. Like change is, I have been diagnosed with an illness. Change is, this medicine doesn't work, we have to try that medicine. Or change is, we're going to have to get a walker. Or change is, we're going to have to get an elevated toilet. Or these are the things that are changing. But he describes transition as, how do we deal with the things that are changing? How do we manage spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in all those ways? How do we manage the things that are changing? That's what we'll mean when we say transitions. And for most of us, some of the way, and certainly at the beginning, the transitions are anything but graceful, right? I mean, the transitions are more like cussing fits. Kind of more like that. And so, here's a few tools that we found along our way. One of the first ones here is very simple. It's just very profound. We found that this question is not one that we've asked ourselves once, but we have asked for 10 years. And it is to say at any given point in time, what's working and what's hurting. Because, you know, if you just kind of got it all together and you got the cocktail right the first time and it all stayed, you know, up and to the right or at least level, that'd be one thing. But I don't know about you, that's not been our experience. Ours has been a bit more up and down. And so we constantly have to ask this question, what's working and what's hurting? Simple question. It's just that it's very profound. When you ask that question, it cuts through the fog of the things we're trying to deny. Like we're trying to deny this cocktail of medicines has quit working like it used to. We're not maintaining, now we're losing. We need to try something new. So we ask, what's working and what's hurting? Well, not changing is hurting now. So we've got to talk to the doc about it. Or we say, what's working? Hey, we're being a part of the support group, or we've got the support system. That's working. Or this medicine we're not getting better, but it's stabilizing. That's working. This medicine, you're having horrible side effects. That's hurting. We have to address that. Or maybe it's just more related to what's going on in life. You know, what are you able to do? What's working? What's hurting? I don't know what your answer is, but just keep that in mind. And that kind of takes us into a place that some of us talked about after the caregiver session just a couple of hours ago, is that, I don't know about you, but we're tempted to kind of play the either-or game, when really it's both and. We tend to want to say that it's either all bad, or we try to deny that it's all bad and pretend like it's all good. And the truth is, it's both. It's a both-and game. It's a both-and story that we tell ourselves as we try to manage being the caregivers. And the truth is, there's some terrible stuff going on. That some of our dreams are not what they were. There's some of the things we want to do, we can't do. That's the truth. We don't want this disease. We don't want to take the medicines. We don't want to spend our money in those ways. But there's also another side to the story. And the other side to the story at the same time, sometimes on the same day, is that in the course of this, I don't know about you, but sometimes we may have met some of the most beautiful people that we would have never met. Now, I'm not saying you got sick, so that, and all that. There's no determinism here. It's just there's good and bad happening at the same time, whether we want it to or not. And our struggle is to try to see both sides of it rather than just either or, because our tendency tends to be to only see the bad sometimes. And we want to try to see the good as well. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. I want to throw that out there. This question kind of gets to that point. Most likely you're doing something right. If nothing else, you came to this conference. You're going to learn something, whether it's from one of the presentations or one of the people, or it's just the general sense of encouragement or information you get, you did the right thing. That's working. You probably may be part of a kit. Maybe you've got the right combination of doctors. What's hurting? Not sure what the answer is for you there, but I'm sure there may be something. This is not for a guilt trip at all. This is just to say, let's examine it, step back, be objective, and say, what's hurting? What do we need to change? So try that at home. Maybe that's less for right now and more for later on. But that's a good one that has helped us quite a bit. Here's another. You may have seen this if you've done anything in the world of conflict management. Any of you manage conflicts? We all manage conflicts, but I don't know if you've done this professionally or not. You may have come across this little template, this little model that asks the question, what's below the line? Well, there's the presenting issue, and then below the line there is the real issue. So, for instance, the presenting issue is dermatomyositis. The presenting issue is, I'm getting weaker. The presenting issue is, are we going to try that IVIG treatment? Are we going to try whatever other new treatment? The presenting issue is, I think it's time for a cane. Or the presenting issue is something like that. The real issue, though, is what drives it all. Is what drives our emotions, what makes us mad, what makes us sad. And usually what they'll say is that the real issue has to do with about three things. The real issue usually has to do with fear, power, and freedom, and good connotations of each one. It usually has to do with the fact that fear. We're scared to death. What's going to happen next? When my wife was first diagnosed, and she's 31, and we had young children, and I'm thinking some nights, and it was bad early on. I mean, in our first 3 years, there was almost a whole year she couldn't drive. It didn't work for those 3 years. There were some nights that I really thought, and I wondered, am I going to be a widower in my 30s? And I didn't know. It was fear. And that was driving how I thought about what we talked about when we went to the doctor, or how I talked about the things that were changing. But it also has to do with power. You know, and not like power trip or anything, just power. Being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. The fact is that DEM can be, or any three of the manifestations, or any of the sub-manifestations of myositis can be limiting, right? And so when you lose a little power, I don't know about you, but when I lose a little power, that makes me mad. I don't want to lose any power. I want to do stuff the way I want to do it, when I want to do it. And sometimes we run into the limits. And that's very akin to the freedom. You know, when we lose some freedoms, that drives how we're thinking about these presenting issues. Again, this is something to mull over, maybe just a model to reflect on later, but I want to introduce it to you because for us, this has really been helpful. Now over to the right side of your handout, and again, if that's not helpful to you, don't worry about it, but if that's helpful to you, feel free to jot some notes on the handout. There are 7 big transitions, and I talk about these in the book, Graceful Transitions. And the tone of that book is very similar to the tone of this talk. But these are not the only 7. There are certainly far more than 7. But 7 of the ones that we tend to experience have to do with physical ability. That usually is the first one that presents to us is physical ability. But there's also the change related to driving. I usually say, 16-year-olds are really excited to get to drive, right? And they think it is a big deal to drive, and it is. But for a 76-year-old to have to stop driving, that's a bigger deal. That's tougher. It's a major transition. Anything related to your home, whether it's having someone come in to help clean, it's having home health services, or it's not safe to live at home alone anymore, it's time to move, or the kids are moving in with us, or we're moving in with them, or anything related to home is a major transition. Protection. Some of you may have experienced the role reversal of the patient is the one who is really more the protector of you, and now you're the caregiver and you're the protector of them. Major transition. Financial. Well, that doesn't really require much explanation. This stuff's expensive. Mental. It's where this could mean anything. There's about 3 areas that this could mean. This could mean it's just depression. That caregiver or patient is incredibly likely to experience some level of depression along the way. It also is, it could be that there's an underlying mental illness that's been under control, and then you introduce these new meds, and that kind of gets the mental illness out of whack, and now there's a whole new struggle going on there. And then, of course, there's the major transition of legacy and dying. And most of us that's not a lot of fun to think about, but that's one major transition that kind of moves up in our expectations for life. Whereas we might have thought of, most of us, I think, when we're well, all think we're going to live to be 100. And then when a disease comes along, we realize, you know what, I might have shaved a couple decades off of that. And that's a frightening thing to think about. Okay, I don't know about you, but this is getting depressing. So let me tell you a story that has nothing to do with caregiving or myositis. I have a friend. His name is Mike. He went to law school, and it was rather expensive, and so he promptly took a good law attorney job downtown Oklahoma City, and 3 months later, there was a gentleman who was running for the governor of Oklahoma who needed a chauffeur to drive around the state, and so Mike quit his law job to be a chauffeur, which pleased his dad to no end. He's like, we could have done that for $185 3 years ago, So Mike starts driving this governor candidate around the state, and then becomes his campaign manager, and then becomes his chief of staff, and anyway, gets into a big career in politics, and does quite well with that. So he's just an interesting guy to start with. Do you guys have some friends that are those people that are like free entertainment? That when you talk to them, you don't know what they've done next, but they did it. And you could not possibly make it up. Okay, Mike is one of those guys. I love having lunch with him because he always has a new story like this. Well, a few years ago, he was getting ready for his sister's wedding. And as he was getting ready for his sister's wedding, he has a haircut kind of like mine. And so he had the trimmers out, shaves his head. And he looked and he realized he kind of had some googly eyebrows going on, so he thought, okay, I need to shave the eyebrows before the wedding. And so he puts it on level 5, or level 1, whichever it was, the longest level that's safe for eyebrows. And as he went across the first eyebrow, his thumb kind of slipped on the guide, and the guide went from like level 5 to level 1, and so, and he went, whoa, uh-oh. Now he had one eyebrow. And so as he's trying to decide what to do about this, he's like, well, there is still some peach fuzz on here as I switched gears, and that thing went a whole nother speed than I thought it was going to. And he thought, okay, if I do the other one, it'll probably look okay. It was worse. So now he has no eyebrows. Okay, so he calls his wife, who has run out to get something for the wedding, and so she's getting something last minute. And he tells her about the predicament. She says, okay, that's all right. I'll get some hair dye and I'll bring it home. If you've got peach fuzz, that'll be okay. It'll probably pick up the dye and you'll look all right. So they come home, he mixes up the hair dye, and they haven't ever used that before. And he's like, I don't know how you do this. So he says, I just kind of got like 2 globs on each finger and went, and let it dry. Did whatever you do next. And that was worse of a problem because now it just looks like some guy that went. So he asked his wife, what am I going to do? And she just handed him a wash rag and said, start scrubbing. So he did. And there are incriminating pictures of him somewhere from that wedding. Well, why would I tell a horrible story like that? Well, because it has to do with speed. The speed you think you're going, and then the speed that other things are going. Let's try this next, another one after that. Okay, this also comes from William Bridges, and one way he describes change and transition is to say that essentially when things change and we begin to transition through those changes, then what we're doing is we are experiencing these 3 phases, is one way to analyze it. And you can say that when things change, what it means is that something has ended. Like for your caree, they may not have ever had an illness before, and when they were diagnosed with some form of myositis, that clean bill of health ended. Or maybe they had some other pre-existing conditions and other illnesses, and then that came along, but there's something that ended. Okay, so when you go through a change, that's what it means first. Now, once things have ended, it takes us a while to reconcile with that, to be okay with that, right? And so it throws us into the neutral zone. The neutral zone is a place of all questions and no answers. The neutral zone is a place of discombobulation, disorientation, dis-everything. It's when we say we have a problem and we don't know the answer. I'm not even sure where I am on the map. I just know things are not okay. And that's the land of the neutral zone. It is a very uncomfortable place to live. But most of us live there for a while. And eventually we come to a new beginning. When we say, hey, we have a plan. We have an idea. We're going to go see this doctor. We're going to try this treatment. It may or may not work. It may work for a while. But whatever it is, we have a new beginning. And with the new beginning comes some new hope. And so as we transition and change, we go through these. And so here's what's tough about it. What's tough about this is that in your family system, any psychologist in the room that knows systems theory stuff, basically, if you want to boil down the systems theory definition, you could say for caregivers it is, no person is an island unto themselves, is one way to define that. What it means is that when your caree was diagnosed, it wasn't just their problem. It was also your problem. And it may not have just been their problem and your problem. It may be the kid's problem, or your parents' problem, or your siblings' problem, or whoever the people are that, as the old cell phone commercial used to say, whoever's in your circle, right? That's kind of your family system. And whoever's in that circle, this is affecting them. Now here's what makes this so difficult. This is why it's so hard. Is because it's not just about you reconciling that something has ended, and you struggling through the neutral zone, and you experiencing a new beginning and a new plan, but everybody else in your system is doing that. And they're not all doing it at the same speed. Some people are doing that in first gear. Some people are doing that in fifth gear. Some people are just trying to put it in reverse, right? And pretend like this never happened. And that's like the perfect recipe for a good old family conflict, right? That's why you're not talking about it at Thanksgiving, or why you're blowing up about it at Christmas, or why it's so hard to make these critical decisions along the way, because everyone is not going the same speed as we transition through all the major decisions. Does this make sense to you? Okay, one thing you could probably do, and we won't ask you to share this, but for your own purposes, you could probably put names under each one of those arrows. Like, in my experience, I wound up a couple of years after my wife's diagnosis, I wound up leading a caregiver fundamentals program. Now, I hardly even knew I was a caregiver, and I'm leading this program. And then I realized people thought I was the expert, and I didn't know anything. And so I started learning all I could about caregiving stuff, and attending these conferences and learning everything that I could. And so one of the things I learned along that was, as I talked to hundreds and hundreds of families that would come in my office and describe their situation, and it was with Alzheimer's and cancer and heart and autoimmune diseases, I mean, everything. And everyone is unique, and they're unique stories, and they're unique turns in everyone's story. But there also are some very strong similarities. And one of the similarities is this. When it comes to your family system, maybe it's you, your spouse, let's just say a son and a daughter that are your system. And it's very likely that perhaps the son, or let's say the daughter, has started her own law firm. And she's very successful. And she makes decisions every day, and she makes them fast. And she's always been that way. And so as you progress through this, she comes in for the weekend from Phoenix, and the son has been home, and he's the one that kind of deals with it day to day. And daughter comes in for the weekend, and she goes, I don't see what you're complaining about. Sell the car, sell the house, move to the assisted living, and let's fix this problem. And everybody else is going, whoa! Well, she like shot through to new beginning, right? And nobody else was ready for it. And now nobody likes her. Now I know that's like at least a third of you. Okay. All right, it's me too. All right, some of us are problem solvers, right? I mean, we want to fix things. I want to fix things. This is my wife's number one gripe about me, and we're going to talk about this in our session tomorrow. 10 things we've learned in 10 years. We've learned to quit using that term loved one. Sometimes it's tolerated one. You know, sometimes it's that one, you know. We strive for loved one, and most of the time it is. But I want to fix the problem. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So daughter comes in, and she has all the solutions, but son actually lives down the road, and he sees what happens every day. He's the one taking him to the doctor. Or maybe the spouse that has another condition, and really they're mutual caregivers. You know, maybe there's a heart condition, and there's myositis going on. And maybe one of those spouses is living more somewhere in the neutral zone as we come to a conclusion about what to do about this. And maybe son is actually not in the neutral zone. Maybe he's still at ending. He's just like still hoping that if we can get the treatment right, this thing will just go away and it'll be like it never happened. And so you see, it's not so much about right or wrong, it's just people are different. I used to have a boss that would say, after we had a conflict with a client or something, he'd say, hey, everybody's weird. We are. Everybody's weird, you know. Some more than others, but everybody's weird. And some are weird because they're kind of slow, and some are weird because they go too fast, and some kind of like being confused, and, you know. So you can probably put yourself or others kind of where you are, this little snapshot in time. You're probably somewhere on that continuum. And besides that Caregivers Fundamentals program, I've also, and currently do some work with the Parkinson Foundation. I've done stuff with Alzheimer's, and also just speaking at a lot of conferences, just meeting, I don't know, I guess it's thousands now of family caregivers, and meeting thousands of families. And this dynamic, the funniest thing to me is, it's not funny to them, it's funny to me, is that when I share this kind of thing, families are like, you know, you may have never heard of this before, but this is kind of what's happening. And I'm like, yeah, that's everybody. You're not strange as if this is the dynamic that's happening in your family. The challenge is to be graceful in the midst of this reality. The challenge is to step back out of your situation, be objective, and say, okay, all right, so Dan is here, and Tanya's here, and Ashley's there, and I'm here. Whew. Okay, now maybe I can step back into the situation and be a bit more graceful, a bit more gracious, maybe try to help the ones that are slow hurry up a bit, maybe the ones that are fast, encourage them to say, hey, everybody is not processing this at your speed. Now, it doesn't fix everything, it just gives us a little bit of enlightened thinking as we analyze our own families and our own situation. So what do you do? Well, there's, you know, we could probably go on for the rest of the 3 days about that, and there will be other sessions that will help you to this end, but I want to suggest 3 things next, and go one more past that. And yeah, right there. You probably see these every day on Good Morning America, or They're in the grocery aisle with one of those magazines. You know these things. This is not new information. You may have your own way that you package it. You may have your own motto that reminds you. If you don't, maybe these will work for you. The first is, because really to be graceful, or anywhere close to graceful, as we transition through unwelcome changes, because there is bad happening, right? There are things we don't want. But there also is beauty. And there's unexpected beauty sometimes. So it's a both-and story, not an either-or. And to put yourself in a position to be able to receive the good side, these three things are crucial. The first is to do something for yourself, by yourself, at least weekly, if not daily. And this goes for you and for the patient. Do something for yourself, by yourself, at least weekly, if not daily. You know that. Okay, so some people it's exercise. Some people it's I have to take my 1 mile walk every day. Some people it is, I'm a hot bath taker, or a movie watcher, or a book reader, or a bird watcher, or whatever it is. And it's not that doing that once is magical. It's not that doing it a few times fixes everything. It is actually the habit. It is the rhythm. It is the fact that this becomes part of your life. And you know the things that drain your cup. Okay? Probably learning how to pronounce a new medicine drains your cup. Probably, there are plenty of things that drain our cups. There are other things that fill our cups, right? Do something for yourself, by yourself, at least weekly, if not daily, that fills your cup. Maybe not full, but at least you're more full. You take a break. As is often said, lots of us flew here. You know the thing about put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then help the person next to you, because if you're not breathing, you're no good to them. All right? So do something for yourself, by yourself. Here's one I will suggest to you. You could take walks in cemeteries. That's creepy. Maybe not for everyone. I love to hike and backpack and camp, but in the first 3 years of my wife's illness, and the kids were so small, I couldn't really get away to do that. And so there was this big, big cemetery on the way home from work. And I would swing by that cemetery and walk around the cemetery. I know that sounds creepy, but hear me out on this. And if you've had a recent loss, I know that's more difficult to do than if that's not quite so raw. One reason I did this is because when you walk around cemeteries, no one bothers you. They don't. Because they assume you're either grieving or you're off your rocker, and both kind of applied in my case. And so as I walked around, though, about 15 minutes, here's why I did that, is because there's only a few words left, but as I considered those few words, I was pieced together life stories. And as you piece together life stories, you often come across tragedy. The worst things that can happen in life have happened to these people. They've had divorces and bankruptcies and diseases and premature deaths and all that. How do they handle it? I don't know how they handled it. The only question left is, how am I going to handle it? And so as I left, I would leave with some question marks, but I would leave saying, you know what? There was a time when I wondered if I would be a widower. And my kids still have a mom, and I still have a wife. And this is not the way we had planned it. But this is what we have, and I'm going to go home and make the best of it. And that would work for a while. And then it would wear off, and I'd need to go for another walk in the cemetery. So I don't know what your way is that kind of refills your cup, and I know that's creepy. But I would encourage you, do something for yourself, by yourself, at least weekly, if not daily, that doesn't have to cost anything, that refills your cup so you can keep going to care for your caree. The second is to connect with people who fill your cup. You know, the research for decades now, if you go to some of the major caregiving association websites, you'll find some research, lots of it out there. And it basically says, in multiple studies, would say that we tend to isolate ourselves. When bad things happen, we tend to pull away rather than connecting. That's a tendency of many of us. Not all of us, but many of us. A strong percentage. And we do that probably for some pretty good reasons. probably at some point we told someone about it and they said the wrong thing. If you've been doing this very long at all, someone has said the wrong thing to you. If you've been down this road very long at all, not only has someone said the wrong thing, probably someone was supposed to help and they didn't. Or your sister from, Maine or wherever came and said, I don't see what the problem is. And you were like, yeah. And so we say, well, that's fine then. I just won't tell anybody. Or fine then, I don't want to burden anyone with my story. And so we tend to isolate ourselves or pull away at the very time we need to connect. And so let me tell you, you have permission to take care of yourself. You have permission to connect. This conference is one way we do it. The kid groups are one way to do it. But it also comes in the people maybe that are not directly myositis associated, but it's the people that you can talk to about it, and it's the people that you can't talk to about it, and that's why you need to talk to them, so you don't have to talk about it. This was good for you and the patient. At one point along the way, for me, this was a breakfast group of guys in their young 30s. They're all on their way up the corporate ladder. They're going on great trips. That was not what we were doing. We were going to doctors. And so, but for a while I got to, hang out with them for breakfast every week and kind of feel like I was a normal, 30-something-year-old. For my wife, it was a group of friends that got together, and when we told our story to this group finally, they all came forth with some of their own individual struggles. And that became a very tight-knit group of young women that would meet about every other Saturday for breakfast for a few hours. So this is good for you and the patient. Connect with people who fill your cup. One place you might even want to go for the caregivers, to go to caregiving.com. You've probably checked out some caregiving sites. If you're kind of community-based, caregiving.com does a good job. Denise Brown does a good job with that, of connecting people from all over the country, and even in a virtual way. And so I'd encourage you to check that out. The third that I'll suggest is to ask for help. That's the easiest one, right? No. If you're like me, you much more enjoy being the helper than the helpee. My wife and I are helpers, not so good at the helpee part. But we've learned that actually we need help from people who know things we don't and who can do things we can't. We need to learn from people who are out ahead of us on the path. We need to learn from people who are coming along behind us on the path that have learned things that we haven't learned yet. Ask for help. If you think about it in any other arena, think about it if you've ever had a successful business or been successful in any area of your life, it requires the help of other people. Most successful businesses will hire an accountant or marketing help or office help or shipping help or whatever. And it helps them be successful. I don't think that's any different when you apply it to the world of caregiving. And that help will look different along the way. Though some of the best help we ever had was early on when we were doing really bad. We were just crashing out. And there were some friends that brought some meals to our house because we had an infant, 2.5-year-old, me, and my wife. And so there were friends that brought some meals. We had never received meals before in our lives. We had taken meals to people's homes when they were sick. We never received them. And so this one lady showed up a week after we had announced we don't need any more meals, we're okay. And she showed up. She would have been a great drill sergeant, Ann Strickland. And she showed up at our house and I said, "Oh, Ann, you may not have heard, we don't need meals anymore." And she got right in my grill, finger in the face, and she said, "I know you can't cook, I know your wife's sick, and I'm bringing meals every week until I think she's okay." Okay. And she did. She brought 5 frozen meals to our home every week, and we put them in the freezer and we ate them, and that went on for months. I don't know how we were so fortunate to have someone like that, but if you have someone like that, don't turn them away. Ask for help. It's all right. That's part of what we're doing here, right? Is asking for help. And we have found along the way that there are some questions that generate peace. Sometimes you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. You ask the right question, you get the right answer. Actually, go on maybe one more. Yeah. Okay. First of all, those of you that are fixers, that are problem solvers, I identify with you. Is this a problem to solve or a tension to manage? This could set you free. Possibly. This could be your question. Because I don't know about you, but I have tried every way I know how to fix my wife's illness. We have tried so many multiple types of treatments, we've tried so many things, and I just want to fix it. And then I heard this question and I realized this is not exactly a problem to fix. I mean, I hope it will be one day. I hope there will be a cure, and I suspect that there will. But in the meantime, I can't fix it. What we have is a tension to manage. We have a situation that we're trying to manage the best that we can. And by the way, I shouldn't leave the story with my wife where I left it, because I had her looking terrible with the 40 extra pounds and the Cushing syndrome and so forth. That went on for a few years, and then through medicine changes and time and so forth, that part kind of changed. In fact, she's right there forwarding the slides, and she'll be speaking with me tomorrow. She does, if this helps you at all, she does way better than me, okay? So I think you'll appreciate hearing from her tomorrow. But one thing that has changed is that we tell people, you know, it's 10 years later, and she still has dermatomyositis. However, she's back to about maybe 80% of where she was before she was first diagnosed. At one point, I don't know what that percentage was, but it was very low. So, okay, we still take meds, we still see the docs, we're still managing. So that doesn't all sound like good news. But on the other hand, she's able to teach now. She's been teaching first grade for several years, and I don't know, I couldn't teach first grade this week. You know, that wouldn't work for me, but that energizes her. And I don't know how many years she'll be able to teach first grade, but that still gives her a purpose and mission, and she's really good at it. But on the other hand, that's all we do. We do a little bit of that, a little with another group in town, and we go home and take care of our kids. We used to be the people who said yes to everything. We used to be the people that, you're getting together, we'll be there. You need some help, we'll help. And now we're the people that say, you know, these are the things we do, we really hope you do well, this is how we can help, and we have to limit what we do. We have to say no so we can say yes to the things that are most important. So things have gotten better, but you know, we're still on the journey, just like you. The second question that is really might give you some freedom actually comes from, I don't know if it originates with them, but the Heath brothers, again, they're business authors, but I think this applies to us, is how can I shrink the change? You know, some changes are so overwhelming because they have like 742 steps, like moving, for instance, or we need to downsize our home, or we need to, you know, we need to make our inside of our home safer, or there's some things we do and they're so overwhelming. And so you just shrink the change. Shrink it down. You know, little steps help us manage so much better. And this other question, where can we find the best help? Well, you're here. But if we're going to offer a few other options for where to find the best help, there are a lot of caregiving sites out there. One that I found to be very helpful that almost no one knows about is agis.com, and that's written in really small print there in the red down in the bottom right corner of your handout. It stands for Assist Guide Information Services. They don't sell you anything. But if you're a checklist person, this is your site. I'm a checklist person. There are checklists on about everything, and you can go and, like, to that website, click on the left bar. There's a checklist. It's one of those things you can click on for just about every conceivable change you can think of. And it's a fantastic website I would recommend to you. Also, honestly, if you want to pick up a book today, they're only $10. I wouldn't have written it if I didn't think it was helpful. So if you like this at all, it's kind of like this. And there are many more resources that we find as we go along. And I'm going to ask you about those in just a moment. But I want to end the presentation time and give some time for questions. And I want to end with this change, this transition. The number 7 on there, of the 7 big transitions up in the top right, is legacy and dying, the one we don't really want to think about so much. And this is not a myositis-specific story. This is one that actually has to do with Alzheimer's, but I think the dynamic is the same for us caregivers. My grandmother, we call her Granny, had Alzheimer's for about 14 years back in the 80s and 90s. And she was one of those people. Have you ever met someone that had their own vocabulary? Like it said words that aren't words, but you knew what they meant? She was that person. And she was a great athlete. She was physically very strong. And she was also, I don't know, how should I say, she was a feisty soul. Okay? I mean, she would fight you right now over whatever. And just feisty person. And so my granny got well into her years with Alzheimer's. And there was a particular day when some extended family had come to visit her, and she was kind of confused about a purse because eyesight's affected with that. And she thought it was my grandfather. And so she is telling him, and they lived in rural Tennessee. And so they had been farmers and all that. And so she's telling him, John Hall, that was his name, get over here, blah, blah, blah. And she's cussing him up one side and down the other. I mean, and my mom's kind of apologizing to the cousins who have shown up. She's like, oh my goodness, Granny would never talk like that. My sister and I are like, that's not the disease or the medicine, that's Granny. But anyway, so she's doing that, and finally, my mother does what you're not supposed to do and says, well, you know, John Hall's dead. Do you know what year he died? 1983. Do you know what year it is? We landed on 1991. And then she thought about that for a moment. And she said, well, I don't care how dead he is, he's going to get over here and help me. You know, so that's kind of how she was. My, well into what my mom called the Pony Express method of caregiving. We now call it the continuum of care. There are multiple levels of care as the disease progresses. And back in those days, my mom referred to it as the Pony Express method. We're going to ride this horse until it gets too tired and then get on a new horse. And so the last horse had come, the nursing home. And my granny was not doing very well at all. My mom said this may be the last time you ever see her. And so we had come in for a visit, and my wife and I went to visit her, and I was trying to get her attention. She was very agitated. Covered her up a little bit better with the sheet. Kept trying to calm her down. She wouldn't calm down. And finally I thought I have to do something here to try to calm her down. And so I tried to rub her hand, and she just kept flicking it away. And then I tried to hold her hand, and I thought, I'm just going to try something here. That I'm not even sure that she's still in there or not. I'm not even sure she knows I'm here. And I thought, I'm just going to try this. And so I started humming and trying to sing to her. And as I started humming to her, that old spiritual, the shaking stopped. And as I kept humming, and my wife's crying in the corner, and I'm blubbering out, trying to sing and hum and whatever I can, she kind of brings her hand over and starts to rub mine. And I thought, yeah, she's still in there. And maybe there was a moment's peace. And 2 weeks later, she passed away. And you know, the thing is, the reason I tell that story is because I've never regretted taking a chance on looking silly. And I've never regretted taking a chance on being vulnerable and being there in the moment, in the pain, in the misery, and just trying to be there. Because 2 weeks later she passed away, and I've never regretted that. And so my encouragement to you as you kind of look out, and I don't know how far away the horizon is, but as a caregiver, as you look out, there are situations we don't want to be in. We didn't ask for this. We didn't plan on it. But it's what has come our way. Let me encourage you to be there, whatever that looks like, in the end or well before the end. Be there. And you know, as we go back, if you can go back to the presenting issue and the real issue slide. It takes a lot of humility to travel from the presenting issue to the real issue in a conversation. It takes a lot of humility for us to say, I'm going to put myself in your shoes. And I'm just going to reflect on that and meditate on that. What would it be like to not be able to get up out of my chair when I want to? What is it like to hold up the line going down the shuttle to try to get here? What is it like to look at my skin and have people and know that I'm being judged? That know that people are looking at the rash and wondering if it's contagious? Or what's it like to know that I had dreams that would last 20 years longer than I think they may now, or 10 years, or whatever? It takes a lot of humility to go travel beneath that line and say, you know what? We're at the conference. We're meeting some people. We're learning. And you know what? The truth is, if I were you, I'd be scared. The truth is, I'd be mad. Because of loss of freedom, loss of power, just the things that cause fear within us. But taking that trip of humility with your caree, I think, communicates really big. That's important. Because as you try to communicate that, what you'll find is that your caree is regaining the partner that they need to live with a chronic illness. Well, we've talked about thinking through these, and these may be more for reflection later, but think about what's working, what's hurting. What are your presenting issues? What are your real issues? What's really driving the emotion of the conversation? Which ones of those big transitions are you currently dealing with? Understand as you kind of step back out of your situation and be objective for a moment before you step back in. But when you step out, you say, hey, we're not all going the same speed. There's someone going 5th gear, some going 1st, and some wishing this never happened. And then step back in a bit more graceful, a bit more gracious with the people who are in your circle, who are in your system. But most of all, if you're going to have a graceful transition, take care of yourself. You have permission to do that. It is crucial that you do something for yourself by yourself, weekly, if not daily, to fill your cup. It is crucial that you connect with people who fill your cup. There's plenty of them that drain our cup. No names, please. There's plenty of those. But connect with the people that fill your cup in whatever form or method that happens. And ask for help. The truth is we don't know it all and we can't do it all. But some people can do things we can't and know things we don't. And we need to hear from them. So I encourage you to that end to be a catalyst in your family system for graceful transitions as you deal with unwelcome changes. And I really think that you can do that. So thanks.